Hello everyone, my name's Pete and I don't like MMOs. In a desperate bid to learn about myself, I've decided that I should play as many MMOs as I can to make a decision on an individual basis instead of just generalising, and so far I'm doing a great job of proving myself wrong. If me making myself look stupid is something that interests you, then the subscribe button is somewhere on your screen. And this is the only way I know to personally let you know that I've made another video. Alternatively, you could give me your email address and I'll send you a nice email when I upload. That's a joke, please don't do that. Instead, give me suggestions of games to play and make my list infinitely long. And if you want me to stop making these, then don't suggest anything and I'll finish the list faster. This video is brought to you by my Patreon supporter. Today we're diving into Phantasy Star Online 2. I haven't bothered looking for the first one and I have a feeling I'll be in for something quite different from Phantasy Star 2, which is my only experience with the franchise. Yes, Phantasy Star has a long history, beginning all the way back in 1987, but history lessons are for another time, and possibly another channel. As with many games on this list, it's a free-to-play title, and it's free content that interests me because I'm cheap. I'm also only really looking at the new player experience, so if you're wanting something a little more in-depth, then I'm happy to disappoint yet another person in my life. I'm playing the new Genesis version of the game, which players just love according to the reviews, and seeing words like this just fills me with hope. There are of course lots of positive reviews, but that's less funny. Launching the game takes us into a rather nicely put together opening sequence with some rather out of place music. Or maybe the music's fine and I just expected something different. It doesn't reveal much about the game except that I'll probably be doing a lot of jumping, fighting big enemies and very likely dressed like a Power Ranger while doing so, and I'm not against any of these things. When the video ends, the start screen is presented in a way that makes me feel like I'm using an arcade machine and I instinctively try and put a coin into the USB slot. Even the sounds the menus make is all very Sega. Here I'm asked to link my Phantasy Star Online 2 account to other platforms that this is available on, and I learned that you can play this on almost any console with the exception of PS5. This particular menu interaction did a number on me, as hitting yes repeatedly doesn't advance the process. I had to actually read the questions to not get stuck in a loop, and I'm already feeling that this game is too complicated for me since it requires reading. Now I need to select a ship, which I guess is a server, and there's a recommended ship button for first time idiots like me. It allocates me to ship number 4, which is Answer. You can join that one for the slim chance of seeing me stop and start while taking notes if I ever come back to this. Then I start to get controller prompts at the bottom of the screen despite my lack of a controller, and I get a little bit worried about it being ported poorly from consoles. Then I'm reassured when I'm asked to choose my preferred control type. Then I choose a graphics setting preset, which is nice and simple for me, and then I press create character to be given a pop-up telling me I can claim a bunch of Sonic related items, and this fills me with hope of a visually and stylistically consistent world. I click through the race choices on offer and notice that they're all basically human with the exception of this robot man. These are the durable race with mechanical body parts, and hang on a second, why are the males robots but the females are this? These robots are called castes, and the remaining races are human, Newman and Duman. They're all almost identical with the exception of Dumans, who have these small thin horns coming from their heads which are barely noticeable from a distance. The descriptions at the bottom tell me that each race has its own strengths and weaknesses, barring humans who have neither, but these only apply when playing the classic version of PSO2 and not New Genesis. I'll try both, but New Genesis first because I don't have a choice in the matter yet. I'm choosing to play as a human because I'm already a bit out of my comfort zone, and I come to find some remarkably in-depth body moulding in the creator. I don't want to spend too much time on this, so naturally I messed with all the sliders and lamented the absence of a randomise button. I then noticed the randomise button when I was reviewing the footage. How observant of me. One of the more interesting sliders was the eyelid position, which lets me close one or more eyes. So I'm having my eyes closed because I think one of us needs sparing from some of the things about to come. I choose my class, and from the description they're all suitably different, and I can change it later apparently. I choose fighter because it looks kind of interesting, forsaking common weaponry for fast fisting action. I can edit my character for free within 5 hours of creation, which is a nice way of informing me that I'll have to pay to edit my character. But first, let's see if I make it 5 hours in. And here I press go! There's a voice counting down my ejection from something, and I see my landing from the perspective of these two ladies picking neon light flowers. One rushes to aid me, and honestly, my reaction here would be, oh god, please close the door again! My rescuer introduces herself and asks me my name, and surprisingly I get a choice in telling her or not. I decide to tell her because I realise it doesn't really matter, and I get my favourite running gag where I'm told that Pete Smells is a really nice name.
So nice to meet you.
Time to take control, and my god does this feel nice. Movement is fast, dynamic and responsive, and that's a really strong start. I have to race to a hill and jump up onto the island, and it's just a pleasure to do so. Then we're attacked by this rather imposing creature, and I discover that combat is just as pleasing as movement to engage in. Some of the control hints given suggest this was all designed for a controller, but that hasn't hindered anything yet. Combat is flashy and impactful, meaning the two main elements of control, movement and combat, are both very well designed. Clicking the left mouse button lets me do a normal attack, and the right and middle mouse use what are called photon abilities. I can also hold shift to make the same three buttons use a different variety of attack. Upon our apparent victory, more enemies appear and we look to be outnumbered, but fortunately we're saved by this muscular gentleman who I'm pleased to note is dressed just as ridiculously as his daughter, whom we've already met. He asks me who I am and I refuse to make eye contact. He politely declines to comment on that and introduces himself as Garrower and assumes my memory is not intact. The good old memory loss for playable characters. It beats coming up with a reason for why you're here. He invites me back to his town, but only when I've helped his daughter and her companion finish the task of gathering Resticine, which is a healing item and is an odd neon glowing plant-shaped thing. Then I'm told I need to glide across the sea to reach town. Manon, who it seems came from the sky like me, informs me that I need to gather my photons into my arms and legs. That makes perfect sense, thank you for clearing that up. As it happens, I'm just double jumping and holding jump on the second press and off I go. It's another movement option and I'm not against it at all. The game feels like it's making use of verticality where possible, and I can't find a reason to complain about that. After floating graciously to the ground, I'm shown the peaceful and serene setting of Aelio Town and pointed to the biggest residence that belongs to Garrower. On my way towards it, I notice an option to do my most favourite thing in the world, which is sitting down, so 10 out of 10. Next game. There's a weird flying robot over my shoulder that's yet to be explained. At Garrower's place, I learn I'm on the planet named Halfa, and in a town named Alien Town. And just to the north is the capital city named Central City, which is a nice creative name. I also learned that I'm a Meteon, which is a name given to people who fall from the sky like myself and Manon. I also learned that the enemies that we encountered are called dolls, and that it's assumed that they come from the same place I did, which is to say nobody has a clue where we came from. At least one mystery gets busted, as the drone next to me is called a mag, and now I have a name for the thing that I don't understand. Then I'm told to go around town whilst dinner is prepared, and apparently everyone in town is just dying to meet me. I guess this place is boring. Let's go and disappoint them all. It turns out that I'm actually getting some tutorial time, and that go and meet everyone actually means go out and do their busy work. I find myself defeating pests and collecting items, but it's actually a nice way to explore. After this I return to Garrower, and there's a long cutscene including a beach party, and the next day everything gets a bit wild. Just as Garrower is talking about how peaceful this town is, dolls start to attack, including what looks like a giant ship looming overhead. Everything gears up towards a big fight, but when the scene ends I get told I've lost connection to the server. Apparently this is daily maintenance time and I'll just have to wait and try again later. Fast forward 3 hours later and I'm placed straight back into the cutscene, which mercifully I am allowed to skip. And then I'm thrust into the expected combat scenario. The dolls are attacking in full force and the whole town is rallying to repel the oncoming tide. We take on some smaller enemies before it becomes apparent that we may be overrun, and Garrower instructs myself, Manon and his daughter to retreat to the caves behind the town. Whilst we head back, there's a very dramatic standoff, which ends in Garrower being swallowed by a huge burst of light, and if my character's eyes were open, he'd probably have been blinded by that flash. The blast appears to knock us unconscious. Upon waking, we find that Aelio Town has been wiped off the planet. That's probably upsetting to my companions, but for me, there were no good pizza places, so I'm not too concerned. We decided that, grief to one side, the best option is for us to go to Central City and report to the attack, and to that end we head through the cave system. There are more enemies in here, and this is used as an opportunity to provide yet more combat tutorials. There's a dashing attack, and an aerial smash that I can use to stun some armoured enemies and open weaknesses. And then I find another Petta's sword, which I'm quickly identifying as the most common doll unit. Although the game controls very well, I'm not very good at it, and I have to make generous use of the healing items scattered around. Luckily, there are generous amounts of healing items scattered around. On the other side of the caves, we emerge into a valley and are given our first distant glance of Central City, which, apart from looking rather unimpressive, is also a very short distance from Aelio Town, and it's likely they probably heard the attack happening. I guess they chose not to interfere with the giant town-eating monster from the skies, which I have to admit is quite wise. From here I can tell you that whilst the distant terrain is ugly in places, the game looks lovely in general. We reach the gate, and upon doing so, we're contacted by an official from the city and invited to the big tower in the centre. Up in the head office, we're greeted by the city's official, whose appearance confirms that there are no old people who live here. Even the head of the planet is about 15 years old. Also, the giant eyes of the characters are starting to creep me out, and I'm glad my character can't see them. Boss Man Boy knows about the doll's attack and can even identify the giant ship thing as Dark Fowls, which apparently obliterated most of the planet years before and is something to be afraid of. On that note, he recruits us all into the Ark's planetary defense team and assigns us some basic training in meeting the team. The voice acting isn't horrendous, but at times it's gratingly dramatic and breathy. So far my feelings are this: the characters look and act stupid, by which I mean it's not really for me, but the controls feel like an absolute dream, so I'll continue based on gameplay rather than plot. Before I can advance said plot, I have to complete a series of tasks including some more training. At this point I'm starting to feel like the tutorials are dragging on a bit and I'm yearning to be released into the world. With controls like this I'd actually like a kill 100 enemies quest, so I can enjoy the game's strongest features, or even a reasonable distance fetch quest, since movement is so fun. And here's the obligatory login bonus, sat beneath the gold coloured premium login bonus. This is a free to play game, so naturally it has to tap into building unhealthy habits and fear of missing out, in order to convince players that it's a great idea to drop some money into a free game to speed up one arduous task or another. But I'm trying not to make these arguments in these videos. I can also earn displayable titles by completing objectives, and so I can show off my accomplishments proudly, and I think those are still free. My task is to find a training cocoon or something. I'm pointed outside of the city and into the wilderness, where I'm told I've entered an exploration area. Apparently these areas are typically more safe to explore and contain docile wildlife and plants for gathering materials. But there's also a risk of them being invaded by bosses or high level enemies, so they're not really that safe. So that's nice and clear. It's actually a nice world to explore so far, so I hope there's real content in it, and I would just love a fishing minigame. The cocoon training facilities, which are rather confusingly located in the wild, feel like the 12th tutorial format at this point. I do feel like I could manage a real quest or something meaningful to work through. I learn a few things here, sure, like extra movement tips, enhanced enemy weak points, and that there's an overly complicated menu for equipping skills to the hotbar. But presenting these tutorials in these laboratory environments really wastes the potential that's created in such a visually vivid world. There's no reason these skills couldn't be learned as part of a quest or story arc. And having me travel through gorgeous scenery to do what's essentially a VR training course really drives this point home. And what are these for? I'm increasingly confused by this game and what it wants to be. I learn a class skill, and upon explanation of the skill tree, which is fairly straightforward, I'm informed that my choice of class is fairly tricky to master. It's a good thing I'm so good at video games. I'm given a recommended skill to start me off, and without information to dissuade me from this choice, I select Overload and swiftly forget about it and never use it. And then I'm told about my storage, and my goodness, it has a bit of a dark side. If your inventory and storage are both full, any items you pick up after this point will be destroyed. Not just left on the ground while you prioritise, destroyed. So I hope you're all going to be really careful with inventory management, because it sounds to me like you could accidentally destroy a valuable item if you're not paying enough attention. Time to move on to another set of tutorials, and at this point I'm beginning to lose interest. I've seen what the game has to offer out there, and I'm just aching to be set free and punch bad guys. Orange?
My name is Orangier.
Nice to meet you, Orange, is my next tutorial provider, and she teaches me about gathering food and preparing meals, which can be used to provide long-term boosts. I'm sorry, but if Ignis hasn't cooked it, I'm not interested.
That's it!
What's up, Iggy?
I've come up with a new recipe.
Thankfully this section is short, and I'm passed over to Rosa for my next instructions. Here I learn about upgrading weapons and armour, which consists of taking lots of weapons and armours and mashing them together to make something better. If nothing else, it provides an inventory management option. And now it's time to actually do something! Head of City Boyman tells us there's a threat nearby and that I can use everything I've just learned to deal with it. I guess what I'm about to do is mash the enemy parts together to upgrade the stats, collect them to make a nutritious meal out of them, use the long-term boost to complete pointless VR training, or maybe I'm thinking in the wrong direction. It's explained to me that my level, equipment and skills are totaled into a number referred to as battle power. Content is locked behind a minimum battle power requirement to prevent idiots like me from charging in out of my depths. Mount Magnus, where my task takes place, is one of those locked areas. Fortunately, everything I've done up to now grants me the required battle power to continue, so I won't need to grind just yet. So off I go to meet my companions for the task. What follows is essentially what the previous 2 hours of gameplay should have been, battling through an increasingly difficult series of enemies and eventually facing off against a boss that's enhanced. This is where the game shines. There's not much plot so far, and most of the characters are kind of irritating. But when you're let loose to fight, the fluidity of the control scheme and the glorious animations of the attacks are really quite something. Unfortunately, just because something's well made doesn't mean I'm good at it, and I die to the boss. I'm under level 15, so death has no consequence, and I'm allowed to take another shot at it. Under normal circumstances, you could use a purchasable item to revive yourself, because of course you can spend money on it. I'm a little more careful the second time round, but I still only just make it to completion, and even so I had a great time doing this section. Mission accomplished, and I can head back to the city, and I'm delighted to learn that I can simply jump off the mountain and glide there. I love the freedom given here, and it makes me actually want to explore, so I'm hoping I'm done with tutorials for now. It's explained to me that I can get my quests from the quest counter, and that I can repeat story quests if I want to. I then head back to the boss to report our success. We're told that we're free to do as we like until our next mission, and that I can explore if I want for now. And I probably will, but there's something more important that I show you. This game is free, so if you liked what you saw here, then you can go ahead and see what the world has in store for you. But as for this video, there's a part 2. It's time to try PSO2 Classic, and for this mode I went ahead and made a new character. I chose Cast as a female, and I went through the customization options to cover up as much as possible. This was as good as I could do, and I feel like I'm now on some kind of list. I'm the durable class, and now it actually means something because I'm playing the classic mode. The opening sequence is showing signs of aging, and the chat overlay is present for the whole thing, which isn't a great start. It's also a generic introduction to the races and how they fit into the Ark's organisation. After that, I appear in a room with a small boy trying to get my attention and calling me mate. But it's probably the most cringe-worthy use of the word I've ever heard, and I'm from the north of England.
Mate, is you, mate.
Alright then, mate.
Hi.
Hobnobs. Thought you might like some, mate. You know, pulling an all-nighter, we're all in it together, aren't we, mate?
The boy, Affin, informs me that we've been paired together for a certification mission. He says we've been given a fairly calm place to do this and there should be no trouble. And I'm positive that nothing at all will go wrong. We need to dive into this pool called a telepool to progress, and because this footage is my third time playing thanks to corrupt recordings, I don't wait for instructions. It's important to note that in both this and the new Genesis tutorial there is no attempt to explain who I am and why I'm here. This bugs me as it really prevents me connecting with both the world and character, and that's kind of important when you're playing an RPG. Once I land or teleport to the planet, I'm given a very straightforward tutorial on movement and combat. Things feel different here. The control scheme is different, the movement has less freedom, and the environment is really showing its age. This game is 11 years old, so with that in mind, it's actually looking pretty good. The gameplay here is very meat and potato, but it's serviceable. Coming to this from New Genesis definitely feels like a downgrade in the movement and combat mechanics. The more action-focused camera is actually an upgrade for the class I'm playing, as it uses ranged attacks for both basic and photon abilities. Attacking causes a ring to appear that I can use to time my attacks. If I hit the button again when the ring turns red, I'll do a perfect attack, which will boost my damage. This makes combat feel more like a rhythm game. Using the dodge function feels easier here too, as I'm actually managing to avoid damage for a change. I understand that Affin is being used to excuse my character's lack of a voice, but my god, he needs to shut up. Some enemies appear that are apparently really bad news, and Affin starts to lose his nerve. Fortunately, this man with excellent hair comes to our rescue. He joins us in the fight against these beasts, which are ironically much easier to beat than what we've been fighting so far. Our rescuer asks me if I'm comfortable using my weapon, and says I should try out many types to find out what works for me. But the menu is greyed out, so I can't, so I guess the joke's on me. We battle through more beasts, and suddenly the corridor opens up, and my years of experience in video games tell me that there's going to be something big here, and I'm pleased to announce that I'm correct. The beast attacks, and our mysterious companion tells us to keep it busy because he'll deal with it with a photon blast. When I say photon blast, what do you think that means? That's right, it means a giant pink biomechanical unicorn that will charge headlong into the enemy. The boss drops a red container, which is specifically a boss container, and I get a bit of loot from it. I did get a weapon here, but I still can't do anything with my inventory. I learned that these enemies are called Falspawn and are some kind of galactic threat. I'm sure I'll learn more about them later. For now, my mission is complete and we're headed back to the ship or space station or wherever we came from, and someone's here to meet us for a debrief. Her name is Echo and she introduces our saviour as Zeno. These two know each other and have some insufferable banter to sit through. These voices aren't the worst in the world, but I'd still like them to stop talking. After some exposition, I get the mission complete screen and I find that the missions are ranked. I receive an S, which means I'm sexy, and I'm transported to what looks to be a central hub area. Affin says he's going to take a breather, and I'm told I can have him as a companion if I want to, but I really wouldn't like that. Then I get a tutorial and accepting quests from the quest counter, which is still a feature in New Genesis, and my first quest is named An Encounter with Xeon. I click on this and find it's just a cutscene involving this lady who repeatedly tells me she's only capable of observation and cannot guide me at all.
I am a being who is capable only of observation.
She then proceeds to give me an item to guide me and provides me with a task. After this, she tells me again that she cannot interfere with anything and can only observe, and I can say with 100% certainty that I do not trust this liar. Weird encounter over, and it's time to learn about the story, daily and weekly missions, which will form the backbone of the content I'll experience, and then I'm released, by which I mean I can head to the quest counter and start doing my own thing. Accepting quests looks scarily like queuing for a party, and I hesitate before pressing the button, but I did it anyway because I'm brave. I find other players in this quest area, but we all seem to be doing our own thing. I wandered around fighting enemies for a while and then stumbled into a boss fight. This felt like I was supposed to tackle it with a party, and the clunkier controls definitely hampered me a little. But I managed, and I think this is a good taste of what's to come. Both of these tutorials have their flaws. With regards to introducing the world, I'd have to say New Genesis does that better, but Classic feels like it wants to set me free faster. Neither does a great job of establishing the player character in the world, and the NPCs I met in both serve to irritate me over most anything else. However, the gameplay is a shining example of what an interesting combat and movement system could be. Classic has less to it and its play areas are very linear, but it's still engaging enough. In some sense this setup is a change from being the chosen one, which has been my complaint in the past, but I still had a hard time caring why I was doing anything. This was countered by the fact that it was just fun to do things. And that's my experience in PSO2. I still have a sizable list of games to get through, and I'm making videos rather slowly, so it's going to last a while. If you'd like to see more, then feel free to press subscribe, or else I can't tell you've done another one, and if you'd like me to make them faster, then you can donate to my Patreon. The links to this and the Discord server you can find me in if you want to chat about your favourite MMOs can be found in the description, and you can drop your recommendations for games to try in the comments, and I'll add them to the list. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.